my mindset has changed. The thing that's got me through 2020 is my mindset. As I said, I think I've been lucky enough to dip, then go up. I realised that in order to survive this year or any year on my own, I have to love myself. So, someone on Instagram asked, how did I get diagnosed? So this story is kind of long-winded, mainly because I started my mental health journey in Liverpool, then went to Manchester and then came back to Liverpool. So when I was 16, I was in sixth form and I started experiencing psychotic episodes, anxiety attacks, and I started self-harming, as well as my low self-esteem. This was after I'd started having eating disorder-like behaviours. My identity was warped. I started having a lot of symptoms of BPD. I found on Twitter a definition of the symptoms of BPD and then I googled it. As soon as I found this, it could be BPD, I latched onto that. And the more I read about what it was, the more I identified with it. I kind of had this thing to latch onto. I had this definition of my identity that I'd never had before. So throughout my life, I'd always been like, who am I? What am I? Why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Why am I fat? Why do I want to kill myself? I had no reasoning for it. My parents weren't the best, but they weren't the worst, you know, so I couldn't even blame them. And I am very determined. I'm someone who, once I get something into my head, I will always pursue it. So as soon as I had borderline personality disorder into my head, I pursued that. So I started going to doctors and I said to them, I think I've got borderline personality disorder. And at the age of 16, they were like, no, you don't, it's just hormones. And I was like, I know I've got this. I identify with this. And they were like, no. So in Liverpool, my GP, after being diagnosed with depression and stuff, I went to CAMHS. This was after I started self-harming. I told them I wanted to die. I told them I had plans to die. And CAMHS then said that I didn't have chronic depression. They said that I was emotional. They said I was overly emotional. And they drew this diagram on a board. I'll never forget this. They drew this diagram on a board and they said my emotions were like a bathtub and my emotions were like the tap. So they turned the tap on and my emotions came in and normal people could say stop the tap when it got to a certain length. Whereas I, overly emotional, let the tap keep running and running and running until it overspilled. Now, if you know anything about borderline personality disorder, that is exactly how therapists describe it. They describe it as emotions overflowing. There's lots and lots of analogies on the internet that you can find about this bathtub or about a faucet or anything like that. But they couldn't see any diagnosis. They couldn't see anything wrong. So I walked away from that appointment thinking they've got that wrong. I remember crying to my mum thinking they've said that I've not got any kind of depression, but I have. I had cuts all over my body, not just my arms, not just my legs, everywhere. I'd cut my face, my neck, everywhere. At this point in my life, I wanted to die. And I said this to my mum, I said, they've got that wrong. So then I went back to the GP occasionally and I was on fluoxetine. Now, fluoxetine was the worst thing I could have ever been given, and that's proven for people with either borderline personality disorder or bipolar, that fluoxetine and SSRIs are really bad. It causes psychosis more than anything else, and it's just all round known for being bad. But of course, I didn't have any kind of diagnosis at this point. I was on the waiting list for YPAS. Don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. The waiting list is 4 years long, so if you'd be told that you're on the waiting list for Y-Pass, good luck actually getting an appointment. Well, I was on fluoxetine for 3 months, and they always say it gets worse before it gets better. I took 2 overdoses in a week. I saw literally no way out. This was in the midst of doing my A-levels. I was 17, I saw literally no way out. I wanted to die. So I stopped fluoxetine after that. I just went without. I thought I felt better without it before I had it, so I just thought, no, not gonna have it. So when I moved to Manchester, I registered with a whole new GP with a whole different new service. So they kind of took me a bit more seriously than Liverpool was. Maybe that was because I was in university. I was 18 now. I didn't have my mum with me. I was much more aware. As I said, I had done a lot more reading. I went to the GP in Manchester. I said, this is how I feel. I think I've got borderline personality disorder. I want you to refer me to the specialist in Manchester, and I want to be put on antidepressants. So I was put on fluoxetine again. This was in the October. I was living on my own for the first time in halls. I didn't talk to anyone in my halls. I stopped eating, and then I was just kind of waking up, going to work, going to uni, going to work, going to bed, going to work, going to uni, going to work, going to bed. So eventually my girlfriend at the time moved in, and that's kind of when the psychosis started. I started completely experiencing these psychotic episodes. Everything kind of got a whole lot worse. I stopped taking the fluoxetine again. Nothing changed. I still wanted to die. The psychotic episodes were getting completely out of hand. I thought, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. I went back to the GP and I said, I need you to refer me. Now I can't remember the order of events from here, but I remember I constantly went to the GP and demanded I see a mental health specialist. I was also self-harming a lot, and I was going to Manchester Royal and Salford Infirmary a lot. I was getting either paramedics there in an ambulance, or taxis there, or even walking there. It was a bad time for me. But at some point, whilst being in Manchester, I lived in Manchester for 2 years, and at some point during that time, I was referred to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist finally did diagnose me with borderline personality disorder. Now when you look on the DSM, I think it's called, it comes up with 10 different symptoms of BPD. Now if you have 5 or 6 of those symptoms, you're supposed to be sent off to a psychiatrist to be diagnosed. I have always presented with all 10 symptoms, even since I was in Liverpool. So when I was 16 and I told the doctor I had BPD, she opened that book and she said, do you have, and listed those 10 symptoms. I've always said yes to those 10 symptoms, but I was diagnosed 4 years later at the age of 20 with having borderline personality disorder. So as soon as I got diagnosed, that then led me to being referred to a personality disorder specialist in Salford, where I lived. So that was the county I was in Salford. They actually had a personality disorder hub, and I had this amazing mentor nurse called Ben. Now, I was only with Ben for about 8 months before I moved back to Liverpool, but he was the nicest, kindest man I could ever ask to understand me. He allowed me to email him when I was having an episode, when I was depressed. He said I could email him at any point. He may not email back straight away, but he would always read it. he allowed my partner at the time to come in to sessions, and he would talk to her about how to deal with me. We'd talk through things. Whenever I said I was anxious about something, we'd talk through it and get to the reason why. And a lot of the reason why I am so positive about how I am in myself now is a lot to do with the strategies Ben taught me. And it might take 2 or 3 years to get to that point, but I honestly don't think I could have done it without him. Now that specialty hub that they had in Manchester does not exist in Liverpool. There's no equivalent. So when I moved back to Liverpool after 8 months of being with Ben, there was no way he could just transfer my notes or anything over to Liverpool. There is a kind of hub available in Waterloo. So that at the time was about 30 minutes away from where I was. Now where I live, that's about an hour. And they meet on a weekday at like 12 p.m. Which, if you work full time, like I did and do, that is absolutely possible. So I only went to about 4 or 5 of those sessions in Waterloo, but it just became impossible for me to go while I was working. And because I told them that I couldn't attend every session, after 2 missed sessions, you are completely dismissed from the hub. If you've watched my video on my notes, you'll know that I've been passed back and forth throughout my entire adulthood. So for the past 6 years, I've never stayed with anyone longer than 8 months. My diagnosis, I have never ever used it as an excuse. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. I have these moments where you might hate me because of what I do. These moments that aren't excusable, that are terrible, really bad, and I can't help it. I'm sorry. BPD is not an excuse, it's a reason. Yes, I did it, but I did it because I have this, because I can't control it. It's something part of me, part of my brain, that I cannot help it. And I'm sorry. And if I've ever hurt you, if you're watching this thinking, I'm sorry. That is all I can say. I'm sorry. I'm definitely a different person now than I was last year, than I was the year before, than when I was 16, than when I was 6. I'm a whole different person. And it's taken me a lot to realise that, but I think 2020 has helped me. Now, I am completely on my own. I haven't seen a psychiatrist since March. I haven't seen any kind of therapist in 2 years. The greatest thing for me was getting out of a relationship that was probably pretty toxic. I got away from someone who was telling me daily that I wasn't good enough, and it's taken me over a year to kind of switch my mindset. And the struggles of 2020 and being on my own. So throughout 2020, at the start, it was horrible. I was so down, I was so depressed, it made me sad. Then I, obviously, as you do, fell for a boy, and we spoke every single day, and he made my life worth living. And then when he stopped inevitably talking to me, I realised that the reason that felt so right was because I was starting to fall in love with myself, and that was largely down to him. He made me realise I could fall in love with myself. I was allowed to. For the first time in my life, someone said you're allowed to love yourself, and I did. And my mindset now, as of December 2020, is positive. I'm happy. I think that I'm gonna manifest to do great things in 2021, 2022 onwards, and I think from now till I die, I guarantee to myself that I'm only going to ever do things that make me happy. I'm not going to do things for anyone else, and I'm determined for that. I'm determined to see this life through being happy. And this year God allowed me to have people in my life, people that kind of make me go, this is what you're all about, this is why you're here, this is why you are deserving to be here, because I did not want to be here. I have started to think, don't get upset about the things that you cannot control. And if you're happy with yourself, that's all that matters. Don't ever change yourself for someone else. That's the biggest lesson I've learned from this mental health journey. From when I was 16 to the age of 23, all I've learned is don't ever let someone else tell you who you can and can't be. I guess the last thing I want to say is, if you're struggling with any kind of depression, anxiety, disorder, you think you might be bipolar, OCD, borderline personality disorder, any kind of disorder, schizophrenia, the list goes on. LGBT, if you think you identify with something that someone else has an opinion on, know in yourself, as long as you know in yourself you are what you are, that is all that matters. No one else can place a label on you. Does that make sense? Like, if you identify as a different gender than the sex you were born with, no one else can place a gender on you. You are you. And that's the most important thing that anyone can ever believe in themselves, is don't worry about what anyone else says, because you are you. As long as you know who you are deep down in there in your brain, as long as you accept who you are and you love yourself, fuck anyone else. Fuck them. Because you are beautiful and you are perfect, okay? And I'm just one person saying that, but ask your best friend. Tell your best friend right now that you love them, and I know what they'll say. So, yeah, that's all I had to say.